I was making breakfast when I saw this. And the only thing that I did was put it in my incubator and try to hatch some baby chickens. But when they didn't hatch, I realized that I would need more than infertile grocery store eggs if I wanted baby chickens. So I bought 22 fertile eggs from a farmer. Little did I know I'd become a mother to 17 ducks, experiencing the hatch firsthand in my little apartment. Now this was the moment that Farmer Karen realized she gave me duck eggs instead of chicken eggs. And you know what? As you can see, I was absolutely okay with hatching ducks instead of chickens. And well, the very first thing that I did was immediately take these eggs home, trying not to crush them before I got there, place them in my incubator, plug it in, and start the longest 28-day countdown of my entire life to see if we would even hatch one of these eggs. And remember, this is the first time I've ever tried hatching actual fertile eggs. Although I've tried hatching quail and chicken eggs from the grocery store, I kinda knew that there was like a 99.9% chance those would never work. But these would have at least a 20 to 30% hatching rate since they're fertile, so I was probably the most excited I've ever been in my life because I'm used to hatching ladybugs and caterpillars and mealworms. But duck eggs? This was gonna be a whole other ballgame. But the only thing that I could do was wait because soon 15 days passed and it was time to candle the eggs to see if they were even growing. What candling eggs are is basically just shining a bright light onto the bottom of the eggs very delicately to inspect the contents of the egg and determine if it is in fact fertilized and to make sure the babies are growing properly inside, if growing at all. And I felt a lot of pressure because it was up to me to make sure the humidity inside of the little incubator was just right so that they would have a better shot at hatching. And as scared as I was, I finally grabbed one of the eggs and started shining a bright light onto the egg. I didn't see anything inside of that egg, so I started to get very nervous. But I reminded myself to trust the process and trust Mother Nature. It had only been 10 or 15 days. And then I started to see a little shadow, something moving. There was something moving in there. And then I thought it looked similar to a little vein. I didn't want to disturb too many of them because the incubator moves every 4 hours itself, and it was actually better not to touch them so much during the process so that they could just do their thing. But as per the instructions, we had to candle them every 10 to 15 days to make sure that the eggs were all doing well. So I took about 4 more eggs out of the 22 and candled them, and what do you know? All 3 of them had veins inside that were moving, and soon I felt deep in my heart of hearts that the next time we candled these eggs, we were gonna see little feetsies and bodies. I'm not sure why, but this moment made me so emotional because I was finally doing it right and growing baby ducks from a tiny little egg, all by simply giving them the right conditions to grow. And boy, was I excited to witness the metamorphosis of a duckling. This was already so magical, and there was still so much magic to experience. I was rushing with emotions. But anywho, after 5 more days passed, I candled them again one last time before hatch day. You're not really supposed to open the incubator at all the 4 days before the hatch day, so this was the moment of truth to see if we were gonna hatch some babies. I took 4 more eggs out of the incubator, turned out the lights, and started shining a bright light into those eggs. And I got so excited because they were moving, and there looked to be a little shadow of a duck. I knew I needed to get my better camera out, so I did, and I started shining the lights in them, and just look at the beauty of the metamorphosis of a little duckling. You can literally see the little feet at the bottom of the egg, and the little shape of their head and triangular beak too. It was the most exciting moment of my metamorphosis and hatching experiences so far. And that was the moment I knew that it was finally time to get their home ready. When I purchased the eggs, I got everything the ducks need to grow up healthy and strong. And once they do grow up, I'm gonna take them back to the farm after raising them for 14 days. So I added the bulb to their heat lamp and secured it to their little box. I filled up the little box with their wood chips. I put their food and water bowl inside their home. I grinded up their food so they wouldn't choke on it. And I made their little duck Gatorade for nutrients to add to their water once they hatched. Oh, and I got them a little pool chair that would act as a little swimming pool for them because they're so tiny that this thing would be perfect for them as a little pool. Slowly but surely, everything was coming together, and there were only 3 days left on that incubator timer. And I could have sworn that I saw one of those eggs move. So you already know that I had to set up like 4 camera time lapses on the eggs to make sure that we got every angle of these little babies hatching. And I wasn't even sure if any of them would hatch or not, but I was ready because hatching day finally came. I didn't know if they would all hatch at once, or if just one would hatch, or if many of them would hatch, so I was really nervous for this moment. But I had my time lapse going, and every time it stopped, I would review it, and finally I realized that all of the eggs were wobbling, and soon they were gonna hatch. And soon I saw one of the eggs with a chip in it, and I knew that it was time. So I sat there with Rafi, and I waited for our first duck to hatch. But 5 hours passed, and it was now 3 a.m. in the morning, and I didn't know when it would hatch, and you're not supposed to assist in the hatch at all, so all I could do was watch. I stayed up all night that first night, waiting for our little baby to hatch. Our first little baby. Also wondering why the others weren't hatching at the same time though. But all we needed was one little baby for me to be a duck mom, and I would be happy with just one. But then I started to notice that some of the other eggs had cracks in them too, and that's when I started to get really excited, also really nervous. I was like, in that moment I was like, what am I doing again? But it almost worked out like magic how only one ended up hatching on hatching day, because the next day I was in for a real surprise. But just wait, because duck number 1 was crazy. Rafi was really excited too. He definitely thought that he was about to be the father of all of these ducks. So together, Raf and I waited and watched for hours. And soon, I noticed that the ducky was cutting a hole straight down the middle of the egg, and I guess that's how they start to poke their heads and bodies out of the shell. And just so you know, duckies are born with only one tooth, and that tooth falls off after about 3 days, but it's what helps them break out of their shell. Rafi was very concerned for what was going on. He literally stayed up with me all night. He's the best companion dog in the world, and we had a ball watching this beautiful metamorphosis that we did together. It was magic. I felt all the feels, and even though we were tired, there was no way that we were gonna miss the first baby hatching. I'm not really sure why it took so long, but the first duck took more than 12 hours to hatch, whereas the others that you're about to see took anywhere from 5 minutes to 3 hours. So I think it was just meant to be, to appreciate the process that much more. I was honestly a bit scared though, because it was taking so long. But then the moment finally came. Our baby hatched, and it was healthy and happy and chirping like no tomorrow, and it was the best moment of my life. Wow. There he is! That's a little ducky! And by this time it was around 3 a.m. So I put the first little ducky in our home and stayed by its side until another one hatched. I named this one Millie.
You have to calm down, okay? I know you're excited. She's your new little baby.
I wasn't sure how long to keep Millie in the incubator, but I brought her to her new home and made sure that she survived the night, because remember, I had never hatched a duck before, so I wasn't sure where she would be most comfortable. But I got another heat lamp, and I was there for moral support to keep her warm, and I waited for the others to hatch too. This little duck was so small and floppy, so I made sure to keep a careful eye on her until I knew she was ready to be alone. The inside of the egg was really gross, but I figured I'd show you what it looks like after they hatch. And Millie, me, and Raf sat there all night. Millie dried up and became all cute and puffy and fluffy, and finally she fell asleep, and Raf and I waited for the others to come, but we didn't even know if any would at all. I honestly ended up sleeping on the floor that night, and when I woke up, I saw 2 more babies inside of the incubator. Richie and Rhino were born. And then a 4th hatched. I named him The Cuteness. My favorite movie is Master of Disguise. If you know, you know. So now we went from 1 duck taking 12 hours to hatch to 4 ducks in the matter of what felt like minutes. So I let them dry off in the incubator for an extra hour than Millie, and then brought them back into their new home to start to grow up and to join Millie. Millie greeted them with open wings, and they were already all best friends. It was so cute. They accept each other right away. They need each other to survive. So I was happy that Millie had other ducklings to grow with too. And guys, was I excited? I felt like I could handle 4 ducks. Soon they all became so puffy and cute, and they were growing by the minute. But I wasn't sure if any others would hatch, because I waited and a whole 2 more days passed by. And finally we had duck number 5 hatch. But this one had a problem. okay? She was born with some sort of membrane coming out of her body, and I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know if it was my fault. The others were so normal, and this one, there was a huge problem. So I put her back in the incubator and noticed that she wasn't really moving very much. It was different than the other ducks. So immediately I texted Farmer Karen and I asked for her help. I told her what happened and she instructed me to put dental floss around the membrane. And even though she said that the whole sac didn't look too bloated, honestly, to me, it looked pretty bloated. So it wasn't something that I could just pull off this duck. I guess the dental floss would help cut the circulation to that little membrane and make it fall off on its own. I was nervous. I wanted her to survive. I prayed that she would be okay. I even named her El Karim because that's miracle spelled backwards. I had so many questions for Karen, but she wasn't really able to help me much. She just kind of told me to just let the duck do its thing. So I put my trust into Mother Nature, but I was still determined to help Elkie as much as I could within those parameters. And I got so worried that I wasn't really even able to pay too much attention to the other healthy ducks because this one needed so much help, but it didn't really matter. All that mattered to me was that this one survived. She was chirping and that was a good sign to me, so I tried my best to follow Karen's instructions and I started with, if you want to call it, surgery. This little duck was so gentle and cute, I just wanted a miracle here with my miracle. I cleaned her up as much as I could and I got all the pieces off that would come off and then I got the dental floss.
I know, baby.
And gently, I tied it around the membrane. It was actually really difficult to do and it really grossed me out a lot, but the only thing that I cared about was trying to save this little one's life, and I kept her separate from the others with a separate heat lamp and a little towel for a blanket, and I tried hand feeding her water. I also gave her extra cuddles with her in my lap. I took her outside in the warm heat in the summer sun. Thankfully, it's summer right now in Canada. I just wanted to keep her warm, and like Karen said, then I let Elkie do her thing. For the full day, she was lying down in the towel, a little bit weird. But I was praying for a miracle and hoping and hoping. I also noticed that when she breathed, some liquid came out, like maybe she wasn't breathing properly. I wasn't really sure what would happen. But the good thing is that the other duckies were all thriving, so I was trying to manage my energy tending to this little sick duck while also the other 4 healthy ones, while also at the same time trying to figure out if any of the other eggs would hatch, because remember, there were still 17 eggs left to hatch. So I prayed for a miracle. And while Elsie slept that day, another duck hatched in the incubator and we had duck numbers 6 and 7 come to life. I let them sit in the incubator for about 2 hours, and when they were ready and sort of dry, I brought them to meet their brothers and sisters. And before I knew it, the whole day passed and I kept checking on Elkie, but to be honest, she wasn't looking so great. And every time I looked at her, I thought she looked better, but then I realized that she didn't look better and I just wasn't sure at this point. So I decided to keep her with me and give her extra love and care and attention and warmth and hand feed her, and I wanted her to have that much more of a chance at survival. She had her own little food and water bowl, but she couldn't eat or drink alone, so I tried my best to help her. She was sitting up, which I thought was a good sign, and the membrane on her body was changing. It looked different than it had in the morning, so I just wasn't sure what to do or what to expect. She hadn't yet walked or stretched out her feet like the others, and she was chirping away, so I waited and I kept her with me. We even watched a movie on the couch together, but she kept lying down in this weird position, and by the end of the day, about 10 hours passed and it looked like she kept getting a little bit worse. It almost looked like she couldn't breathe properly like the others. So I waited and I waited, and at hour 12, Elkie lost her life. She died in my hands. And at that point, I was losing hope because I was crying so much and I was really upset that my prayers were not answered with Elkie and that we didn't get the miracle that we hoped for. But sometimes animals die and sometimes they live. It's the cycle of life and the cycle of metamorphosis, and I was so thankful that I got to be Elkie's mom for 12 hours. As I write and read this, I'm crying too. But the story doesn't end here, because so much more life was about to happen right before my eyes and I didn't even know it. It's like my prayers were answered through all of the other ducks, because the same moment Elsie died, I heard chirping from the incubator. Are you waiting at the door all day with the duckies? And then I realized that there were more ducks that hatched. I was keeping most of my attention on Elkie, praying that she could survive, and when she didn't, I realized that I wasn't paying attention to the others, so I ran to the room where the duckies lived and prayed that each one would hatch perfectly after Elkie. We couldn't go through that again, and I did everything right. At least I thought that I did. Well, we had 3 more hatch and 1 still in its egg, trying to come out, but having a hard time. And before I knew it, more and more were hatching, and ducks were now coming out of my ears. And they were all healthy. There was just one that seemed like it was having a hard time hatching from its shell. It had been 3 full days for that one duck trying to hatch, and I wasn't sure if I should help it or not, but I kind of just let it do its thing. I put my trust in Mother Nature. I will always believe in Mother Nature. And finally, the duck came through and it successfully hatched. So now we were at 11 ducks. I couldn't even keep track of the cameras that they were hatching so fast. And one by one, I kept bringing them to their new homes to join their brothers and sisters. They were growing so fast, and the only thing that I thought about doing was taking them swimming and feeding them eggs, because Karen told me that eggs are really good protein, okay? Don't come at me. Go Google it right now, okay? I promise. And they love it. They hop it down. It's the cutest thing ever. But I decided to take the first 6 born swimming because they were about 5 days older than the rest, and they definitely were ready to get wet. And I almost lost one of them. So after I almost lost one of them, the cuteness, that was the cuteness, I kept them indoors.
I literally am not cut out for this life.
But I would make scrambled eggs for them every morning, some mashed bananas for snack. Who's ready for some scrambled eggs? And they had 2 daily swims, 1 in the bathtub and 1 in the sink, and I let them walk around my house with me, running after them with wet wipes and cleaning solution to wipe their poop. And I even tried to get them to follow me, but the only way you can get a duck to follow you is with love and care, contrary to what a lot of you may think, that a duck adopts the first thing it sees after being born as its mother. That actually is not true. It takes a lot of love and a lot of care for a duck to follow you. So that's what I did, or at least I tried to do, and by the end of the 2 weeks, a lot of the ducks would follow me, and Raffi became their best friends. Even though he didn't love when they nipped at him, they just wanted to play, and he just wanted to give them kisses, and he ended up thinking that he was the father of 16 ducks. And with the eggs that never ended up hatching, I did the float test just to make sure that they were in fact not going to hatch. Just like with garden seeds, if the egg is dropped in water and it floats, it's not viable for growth. However, if it sinks, it is viable for growth, and it just needs more time to grow or hatch. So after doing this, all of the 5 remaining eggs floated, which means for whatever reason, Mother Nature decided that these duckies were not meant to hatch onto Earth just yet in this lifetime, maybe in the next. But like we mentioned before, 2 weeks passed, and that meant that the ducklings had to go back to the farm to live with the other farm animals and have a better life than I'm currently able to provide them. I wish I could have kept a few, but I want them all to live their best lives, and with me in a small apartment, it's just not possible right now. I do have plans to get a bigger property with a bigger backyard, and in that point in time, then we can get some ducks, maybe even go back for these guys. But I was still so happy to bring them back to the farm, knowing they would live a much better life as pets to the farm. Don't worry, nobody's gonna eat them. Maybe one day we'll go back and visit them, and we'll see if they remember me. I named most of them.
Of course you did.
Squirrel, Oreo, Quaker, Millie, Richie, and this is Rhino.
Oh, I like it.
And we have Lila, and the cuteness, and Chocolate, and Donald. But all I know is that Elkie will always be visiting us from up above. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys so much.